The galaxy had witnessed extinction more times than it could count. Civilizations rose in brilliance, burning like stars for a fleeting moment, only to collapse into silence. Entire species had vanished without leaving behind even a signal echo. And almost always, at the end of those stories, there was an apex species. They were not empires. They were not governments. They were forces of nature. They did not negotiate. They did not threaten. They simply arrived, and everything else ceased to exist. So when deep space sensors along the Orion Arm detected movement near a quarantine zone, the Galactic Council reacted with immediate concern. That region belonged to the Corthal Devourer, a living planet, an organism so vast and ancient that even stars seemed young in comparison. It consumed biospheres whole, absorbing ecosystems into its endless hunger. Entire star systems had gone dark after encountering it. Nothing approached the Devourer. Nothing survived it. And yet, something was moving toward it. At first, the data made no sense. "No fleet signatures," said the lead analyst, her voice tight with confusion. "No cloaking fields. No energy spikes. No weapons." Counselor Viral leaned forward, her tendrils twitching uneasily. "Then what are we detecting?" The analyst hesitated before answering. "Biological entities." The chamber fell silent. "How many?" someone asked. A pause. "Millions." The display shifted, projecting a magnified image onto the chamber's center. It was a barren world, scarred, unstable, and poisoned by the Devourer's presence. The surface cracked with slow-moving fractures, and ash storms rolled endlessly across the horizon. And across that dead landscape, humans were walking, not running, not advancing in formation, not deploying war machines. They were simply walking. Lines of them stretched for kilometers, moving steadily toward the Devourer's surface structures. Some carried equipment. Others dragged supplies. A few supported those who stumbled. But none of them stopped. "This is incorrect," said Viral. "No species approaches an apex predator without overwhelming force." "They have none," the analyst replied. "Then they must not understand the threat." Another observer spoke quietly. "They do." Viral turned sharply. "Explain." "They are looking directly at it." The image zoomed further. The humans were not blind to danger. Their heads were raised, their eyes fixed on the horizon where the Devourer's surface writhed like a living nightmare. They saw it, and they kept walking. A ripple passed through the planet. The Devourer had noticed them. Massive fractures split the ground as titanic tendrils erupted upward, each one large enough to shatter mountains. The air itself seemed to distort as the creature prepared to feed. "Send warning signals," Viral ordered. "Already sent." Response: "None." The first tendril struck. It came down like a falling world. The impact obliterated thousands of humans instantly, reducing them to nothing but dust and scattered debris. The line faltered. For a moment, it seemed reality would reassert itself. That instinct would take over and the survivors would flee. They did not. The line closed. Humans stepped around the crater and continued walking. A second strike. More loss. More destruction. Still forward. "They are not reacting correctly," one counselor whispered. "They are reacting," the analyst said, her voice barely audible. "Just not in a way we understand." Storms intensified. Gravity shifted unpredictably. The ground itself attempted to consume them. Humans adapted. They adjusted their footing. helped one another stand, reformed their lines, and kept moving forward. No battle cries, no declarations, no hesitation, just movement, slow, relentless, unstoppable. For the first time in recorded history, the Caudal devourer paused. Its tendrils hovered above the advancing humans, not striking, not retreating, waiting, observing, as if trying to understand what it was facing, because this was not prey. Prey fled, prey panicked, prey fought desperately when cornered. But this species did none of those things. They're not trying to win, Viral said slowly. The analyst nodded, eyes locked on the screen. No. Another human fell. Another stepped forward to take their place. The line never broke. They've already decided something far more dangerous. Viral's voice dropped to a whisper. What? The answer came quietly. That stopping is not an option. And as the Devourer, an apex entity feared across galaxies, hesitated for the first time in its existence, humanity continued its slow march forward. Across the galaxy, apex species ruled through a simple law: dominate or withdraw. There was no middle state. Every creature that reached the top of evolution understood risk with terrifying clarity. Survival depended on recognizing patterns, knowing when prey was weak, when resistance was futile, and when danger outweighed reward. The Caudal devourer had survived for millions of years because it followed this law perfectly. It consumed only what it could overwhelm. It avoided what could threaten it. Nothing had ever confused it before. Until humans. The Devourer's neural network, spread across oceans of living tissue and continents of shifting biomass, focused entirely on the advancing species. Every microscopic sensory node analyzed the phenomenon in real time. Biological scans confirmed extreme fragility. Humans possessed soft tissue structures easily destroyed by pressure. Their bones fractured under forces many apex predators ignored. Their speed was limited. Their claws were non-existent. Their natural defenses were almost laughable. Everything about them indicated prey. Yet their behavior contradicted every evolutionary model. Prey ran. Humans walked forward. The Devourer released its first adaptive response: pheromonal terror waves. Invisible biochemical signals flooded the atmosphere, designed to overwhelm the nervous systems of lesser organisms. Entire civilizations had collapsed into panic-induced extinction under similar attacks. Human movement slowed. Some collapsed, trembling uncontrollably. Heart rates spiked. Neural patterns showed extreme fear responses. But the line did not turn. They kept walking forward. Galactic observers leaned closer to their displays, unable to look away. "They are afraid," noted Counselor Jex. "Yes," Viral replied quietly. "Then why do they not retreat?" No one answered. The Devourer escalated. The surface itself began reshaping, organic mountains rising to block paths, trenches opening beneath human feet, rivers of corrosive enzymes cutting through the terrain. Humans adjusted. Where the ground broke, they built bridges. Where toxins spread, they deployed filters. Where the path vanished, they carved a new one. Always forward. "They are not reacting to threat level," an analyst observed. "They are reacting to direction." The distinction unsettled everyone present. Apex predators understood conflict as a contest of strength. Humans treated it as an obstacle course. Every new biological weapon the Devourer deployed was met with adaptation rather than resistance. When electromagnetic pulses disabled advanced technology, Humans switched to mechanical tools. When seismic tremors shattered structures, humans rebuilt them stronger. When storms blocked visibility, humans navigated by touch alone. Losses continued. Thousands became millions. Millions became generations. Still, the line moved forward. More apex species began monitoring the anomaly. The Vorkai, whose razor limbs could tear through planetary shields. The Cerati mind swarm, capable of dissolving individuality itself. The Drex colossi, creatures so immense they altered planetary gravity simply by existing. Each of them observed humanity's slow advance. Each of them recognized something deeply unsettling. Humans were not optimizing survival. They were committing to momentum. The Devourer extended one of its largest tendrils yet, a structure so vast it eclipsed entire cities. It descended slowly, deliberately, casting a shadow that consumed the horizon. Any known species would have scattered instantly. Humans did not accelerate. They did not retreat. They did not attack. They continued walking at the same steady pace. The tendril struck the ground ahead of them, reshaping the entire landscape in an instant. Dust filled the sky. Shock waves rippled across continents. When visibility returned, the humans altered their path slightly and continued forward. "They are learning," whispered one observer. "No," Viral corrected. "They are continuing." The Devourer began calculating probability outcomes. Every simulation produced the same disturbing conclusion. Humans would not stop. Not because stopping was impossible, because stopping was unacceptable. The Predator attempted one final escalation. It opened fissures in its surface, revealing vast internal chambers filled with digestive biomass capable of dissolving anything organic within seconds. The message was clear: advance further, and cease to exist. Humans approached the edge. They looked down into the living abyss, and stepped forward. The Devourer withdrew the chamber, not retreating, reconsidering. For the first time in millions of years, an apex predator hesitated before consuming prey, because prey should not behave like inevitability. Across the observation networks, a realization began spreading. Predators did not fear strength. They feared persistence. Strength could be measured. Persistence could not. And humans had demonstrated they would continue forward long after logic demanded surrender. The Devourer adjusted its behavior. Its tendrils no longer struck directly into the human path. Instead, they shifted aside, not fully yielding, but no longer directly opposing. The path ahead remained dangerous, still lethal, still uncertain, yet slightly open. Humanity did not celebrate, did not pause, did not acknowledge the shift. They simply continued their slow, steady march. Forward. Time lost meaning along the path of the march. At first, the galaxy assumed the humans would eventually stop. Every species had limits, biological thresholds where exhaustion overcame determination, where fear overpowered intention, where survival instinct forced retreat. Humans seemed unaware those limits existed. Years passed, then decades, then centuries. Still, the line moved forward. The original explorers who first stepped onto the Devourer's unstable surface were long gone. Their bodies returned to the endless dust of alien soil. Yet their descendants walked in their place, continuing a journey many no longer fully understood. It did not matter. The direction had already been chosen. Human settlements began appearing behind the advancing line, small at first, temporary structures built to support those who continued forward. But temporary became permanent. Tents became reinforced habitats. Habitats became cities. Entire generations grew up knowing only one cultural truth: forward is life. Children learned to walk while watching the endless horizon. Their first lessons were not about language or mathematics, but about motion. Never stop. Never turn. Forward. Historians tried to remember why the journey had begun. Some claimed it was curiosity. Others believed it was defiance. A few whispered that humanity simply refused to accept the idea that something could exist which they could not eventually understand. Whatever the original reason had been, it had evolved into something deeper. A principle. The devourer adapted continuously. Its vast biological intelligence reshaped terrain into labyrinths designed to slow progress. Entire mountain ranges rose from living tissue, their surfaces shifting unpredictably to disorient travelers. Humans mapped them. When valleys collapsed into acidic oceans, humans engineered floating pathways. When the ground itself pulsed with violent seismic rhythms, humans synchronized their steps with the planet's heartbeat. Forward. The devourer produced defensive organisms, towering guardians formed from hardened biological armor, each one capable of destroying entire human convoys in moments. Humans did not attempt to defeat them directly. They studied them, observed patterns, learned weaknesses, then walked around them. Forward. Galactic observers began noticing something deeply unsettling. Human casualties remained enormous, yet their progress never reversed. Every loss was absorbed into the continuity of movement. Where one fell, another stepped forward. Where one structure collapsed, another was built. Humanity had shifted from acting like a species to behaving like a process. Processes did not feel fear. Processes did not abandon direction. Processes continued until completion. Other apex species began analyzing the implications. If humans could outlast the devourer, they could outlast anything. The Cerati mind swarm attempted interference, projecting psychic pressure designed to fracture human cohesion. Humans adapted communication methods immune to mental intrusion. The Vorkai unleashed gravitational distortions intended to isolate segments of the marching line. Humans built anchors capable of stabilizing entire regions of warped space. The Drex Colossi introduced biological catastrophes engineered to collapse ecosystems behind the human advance. Humans transformed those ecosystems into controlled environments. Every obstacle became another step forward. Eventually, the devourer changed behavior in a way never recorded before. It stopped attacking directly. Its massive tendrils withdrew deeper into its planetary body, no longer striking the ground immediately before the advancing humans. It did not surrender. Apex predators never surrendered. It simply repositioned itself beyond the immediate path, as if allowing space, as if acknowledging inevitability. The humans did not slow, did not celebrate, did not even acknowledge the shift. They simply continued walking forward. Centuries later, the first explorers reached terrain untouched by the devourer's active defenses. The living planet had moved aside just enough to avoid constant friction with the advancing species. It had chosen adaptation over confrontation, because confrontation required victory, and victory required an end. Humans showed no sign of ending. Observers across the galaxy recorded the moment as one of the most significant evolutionary shifts ever witnessed. An apex predator had altered its territorial behavior to avoid a weaker species. Not because that species was stronger, because that species was persistent. And persistence, unlike strength, had no measurable limit. The human line continued beyond the original feeding zones of the devourer, expanding into regions previously considered unreachable. Still moving, still adapting, still walking forward. The galaxy struggled to understand humanity. Every major civilization sent observers, philosophers, military analysts, and evolutionary theorists to study the phenomenon now known as the forward line. They expected to discover some hidden advantage, advanced technology disguised as primitive tools, secret biological enhancements, or perhaps a powerful collective intelligence guiding human decision-making. They found none. Human biology remained fragile compared to most apex species. Their strength was limited. Their reaction times were slower. Their natural defenses were nearly non-existent. Even their technology, while impressive, was not overwhelmingly superior. Individually, humans were unimposing. Together, they were unstoppable, because they did something no apex species had ever needed to do. They endured. Human scientists explained their philosophy simply. Short-term survival is not the highest priority. This idea confused nearly every observer. Survival was the foundation of evolution. Every apex predator existed because it had mastered survival strategies more effectively than its competitors. Humans viewed survival differently. To them, survival was not about avoiding risk. It was about continuing direction. Forward. Human history revealed the same pattern repeated endlessly. They crossed frozen oceans using fragile wooden vessels. They climbed mountains that offered no immediate reward. They launched machines into empty space long before knowing whether those journeys would succeed. They planted forests whose shade they would never personally experience. They built structures designed to outlast their own civilization. Humans did not require immediate benefit to justify effort. They only required possibility. And once possibility existed, they moved toward it. Forward. Other apex species began to recognize the strategic implications. Predators relied on fear responses to control territory. Fear caused hesitation. Hesitation created opportunity. Opportunity allowed dominance. Humans did not remove fear. They continued despite it. This made predictive modeling extremely difficult. Human behavior did not always optimize efficiency. It optimized continuity. If blocked, humans did not necessarily seek the fastest path. They sought the path that allowed movement to continue. This distinction reshaped galactic strategy. Regions once considered highly dangerous slowly became associated with human presence. Not because humans had conquered those regions, because humans had normalized them. Where other species saw hostile environments, humans saw unfinished journeys. Human settlements appeared in places previously categorized as biologically impossible. Cities built on unstable terrain. Research stations inside fluctuating gravity wells. Communities thriving in ecosystems that had once destroyed entire fleets. Each settlement reinforced the same principle. Forward is achievable. Forward is inevitable. Forward is identity. Apex species began adjusting their territorial calculations. Encounters with humans rarely resulted in immediate conflict. Humans did not attempt dominance. They simply continued expanding their areas of activity. Slowly, patiently, relentlessly. When apex predators observed human expansion patterns, they noticed something unusual. Humans did not aggressively claim territory. They occupied space through persistence. Given enough time, regions around human routes became stable simply because humans refused to abandon them. Instability gradually became stability. Danger gradually became familiarity. Resistance gradually became accommodation. One by one, apex species modified migration routes to avoid unnecessary interaction with the forward line. Not retreating, avoiding inefficiency. Because confronting humans did not produce quick resolution, and apex predators valued efficiency. Humans did not. Humans valued continuation. Forward. The devourer itself remained active within distant regions of its planetary body, still consuming energy, still evolving, still alive. Yet its primary feeding zones had shifted away from human movement corridors. The living planet had effectively redrawn its behavior patterns around a species physically insignificant compared to its own scale. The galaxy recognized what this meant. Humans had not defeated the devourer. They had outlasted its willingness to resist. And in doing so, they had demonstrated a truth few apex species had ever considered. Dominance was not always required to reshape reality. Sometimes, persistence was enough, and humanity had elevated persistence into something greater than strategy. They had made it instinct. Every new generation joined the forward line not because they were ordered to, but because movement itself had become part of what it meant to be human. Forward was no longer a decision. It was identity, and identity does not retreat. Thousands of years after the first humans set foot on the devourer's unstable surface, the galaxy had changed in ways no one had predicted. Trade routes had shifted. Exploration boundaries had expanded. Entire sectors once marked as certain extinction zones had become stable corridors of travel, and at the center of it all was a single historical anomaly. Humanity never stopped moving forward. The forward line still existed, though it no longer looked like the desperate march it once had been. What had begun as scattered groups crossing hostile terrain had evolved into networks of cities, research hubs, transit corridors, and generational pathways stretching across previously unreachable systems. The original purpose of the march had faded into myth. Some believed humanity had once attempted to conquer the devourer. Others argued they had only sought to understand it. A few historians suggested the truth was far simpler. Humans had refused to accept that anything in existence could permanently block their path, so they kept walking. Over time, the devourer had gradually shifted its feeding patterns away from regions heavily populated by humans. Not in surrender. Apex species did not surrender, but in optimization. Engaging humans consumed enormous biological resources. Humans did not retreat quickly. They did not collapse under pressure. They adapted. And adaptation extended conflict indefinitely. Predators avoided inefficient prey. The devourer had simply chosen to feed elsewhere. Other apex species observed this pattern carefully. The Vorkai redirected their hunting territories. The Drex colossi migrated toward regions of lower human activity. Even the Cerati mine swarm reduced expansion into sectors containing dense human infrastructure. None of them admitted fear. Apex species did not fear weaker organisms, but they respected inevitability. Human expansion did not resemble conquest. There were no sudden invasions, no rapid territorial claims, no declarations of dominance. Human presence increased slowly, steadily, continuously. A research station appeared. Years later, a transport route connected to it. Decades later, a settlement supported long-term habitation. Centuries later, the region was considered normal space. The pattern repeated endlessly. Forward. A young interstellar civilization, newly admitted to the Galactic Council, studied historical maps and noticed something unusual. Large sectors of space showed no record of apex species control, despite environmental conditions ideal for predator dominance. The representatives asked the Council a simple question. Why does no apex species claim these regions? Councillor Viril, now one of the oldest living witnesses to the original forward line, answered quietly. Because humans once walked there. The chamber displayed archived recordings. Ancient footage showed endless lines of humans crossing unstable ground beneath darkened skies. Storms raged. Terrain collapsed. Massive biological structures loomed above them. Still, they walked. No visible urgency. No visible hesitation. Only direction. Forward. They did not conquer these regions, Viril explained. They normalized them. The young species struggled to understand. Normalization did not sound like victory. It did not sound impressive. It did not sound powerful. Yet every apex species in the galaxy had adjusted its behavior around this single human trait. Persistence. Humans did not require immediate success. They did not require visible progress. They did not even require certainty that their efforts would matter within their own lifetime. They only required continuation. And continuation, given enough time, reshaped reality itself, because time favored the species willing to invest the most of it. Human explorers had long since moved beyond the Devourer's primary territory, continuing deeper into uncharted regions. The forward line had become less a physical location and more a philosophy guiding exploration. Where difficulty existed, humans continued. Where uncertainty existed, humans continued. Where danger existed, humans continued. Apex species remained the strongest organisms in existence. They possessed unmatched biological weapons, unrivaled physical dominance, near-perfect survival instincts. Yet they shared one limitation humans did not. They required victory within a reasonable time frame. Humans did not. And because humans did not require immediate victory, they eventually achieved outcomes no apex species could prevent. The galaxy eventually reached a quiet consensus. Predators hunt prey. Empires challenge rivals. Civilizations negotiate survival. But nothing opposes a species that refuses to stop. Because strength can be overcome. Speed can be matched. Intelligence can be rivaled. But inevitability cannot be defeated. And humanity had become inevitable. They did not announce it. They did not celebrate it. They simply continued their journey into the unknown, step by step, generation by generation, world by world. Forward.